Hey everyone, the Create with Your Card Making Stash Summit is now over, but I'm still totally on the Create with Your Card Making Stash hype, and I just wanted to show you a little bit of a video compilation. So I've combined or mashed up favorite videos that teach you how to take social media inspiration and turn them into cards using your own stash. So I hope you enjoy these videos. There's timestamps as well if you prefer to skip to different sections and things like that of the video, and enjoy.
So by far one of my most popular videos last year was the Don't Copy Cards video, in which I took 5 cards created by other card makers that I totally admire off of Instagram, and I put my own spin on it to show you that you can get inspired without copying, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel either when sitting down to make a card. Alright, so let's dive in with the first card. Now this is a technique I use often. I take a stamp, I stamp it on 2 pieces of white cardstock, and then I color in one of them. You cut down the colored panel so the outside has a frame of your stamp in black and white, and the colored image only takes up a small portion of your card so it doesn't become too overpowering. I absolutely love how the sentiment doesn't take over either. I think that looks really great. I don't have a sentiment like it, and I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to recreate that in particular, but it is super stunning. Now, similar to the image, I'm going to use my Copic markers to color this, but I am going to color it using a lot more bright colors rather than those really royal regal colors, which are perfect for fall and winter. I'm going to make mine a little bit more bright and summery. And I decided to go ahead and color the background as well, but rather than doing it in black, I did it in a little bit of a darker blue. I'm no expert in coloring, but definitely the classes over at Kit and Clowder have helped me over the years to learn a little bit. So now time to make it a little bit different. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add this to my background here. Rather than mounting it onto a piece of gold cardstock, I'm going to leave it as is, and I'm going to just cut off about 1.5 inches off of each side. And that way when I place it on top of the black and white, it's following that simple pattern that she did before. I love the look of cards like this. I've done them before in the past, and I think they look phenomenal. I'm going to add the thanks die to it and then essentially call it a day rather than mounting it on any type of cardstock. So for this card here, I changed up all the colors, the stamp, the sentiment, and of course, I changed up the mounting of the cardstock. But those strips there were way too pretty to throw away, so I added those strips to a second card. So that's the finished second card there, up close and personal. Now this card created by Maria here looks like a really clean and simple card, and it is a really clean and simple card. But any die cutter knows that this card was time consuming. I believe by the looks of this card that Maria used about 5 different colors of gradient cardstock, and she cut out this leaf probably about 36 times. And I think it looks stunning. It's well worth the effort. It's a perfect card for beginners, but it is a time consuming one. So I'm hoping I can explore a way to make this a little less time consuming, but still look good. Now this card here, I could have chosen a leaf, just like the card that she made, but I wanted to keep it a little different. This die is very similar. It's got those fine lines to it, and it's got a variety of images. My go-to cardstocks for these are the Altenew and the Scrapbook.com paper pads that have solid colors that are in smaller pieces, and then I can just cut them down. So you can see here with the press and seal, it keeps all of those die cuts in place. Just wanted to mention that regardless of how many pieces you cut this out of and in different colors, you're going to need some white ones for the frames as well. So again, you can choose to do this as complex or as easy as you want. You can see here I cut this die out several times, I think about 20 in total, and then I cut out 6 white frames. So it was a little bit of a hassle, I'm not going to lie, to cut out things this many times, but in the end it's going to allow you to create 3 different cards as well if you're doing it the same way that I am. So I glued my white flowers to the background here, and I am using all of the flowers here to help me fill them in. So I just kind of placed them on my mat in the same direction as the flowers are glued onto my paper to make things easier, and I created them in about thirds. So 5 to 6 pieces per color, I went in and did that. And I just add my glue to all 6 areas at a time just to make things easier rather than gluing things down one at a time. And I really love the way that she put hers kind of randomly on the page, but having this sort of symmetrical look could add a little bit as well. You'll also notice in the purple I added some glitter cardstock because I didn't have a third color of purple cardstock. That's okay too. Mix it up. Use some mirror cardstock, use some glitter cardstock, add some interest, and then simply add your sentiment. So I put my own spin on this and the card looks completely different to the one that I was inspired by. Now this card by Mindy is absolutely stunning. First of all, I love ink blending, so I like the fact that she took two colors here and she left a little bit of white space in the middle. I'm probably going to swap out the colors a little bit or add something to it when I create my own. Something I never really think of doing that is a super elegant add-on to cards as well is adding vellum and heat embossing on top of it, your stamped image. And it allows that background to pop through and keep the card super elegant and simple. Now the funny thing about this card is I looked at it and I went to go pick some Distress Oxide colors of my own to create a different color combination. And I did create a different color combination, but I ended up picking two of the same colors anyway. I think this card was just stuck in my head because it's so pretty. She used peacock feathers on the top and twisted citron on the bottom, I believe. I decided to go with some squeezed lemonade, twisted citron, and peacock feathers, which shows you that you could switch up a blend just by adding or subtracting one of the colors or putting them in a different order if it allows you to do that. So I created my blended background quickly there, and then I spritzed some water onto it. Now what I am going to do, I'm going to use some vellum as well to stamp on here so you can still see the background colors coming out from behind it, and I am going to heat emboss a flower image as well. I'm also going to be using some gold embossing powder. I think out of the 5 cards that I create in today's video, this one here is probably the most copied, the one you can really tell that I took the inspiration from her card. For a card like this, I would definitely put credit over on social media as to where I got the idea from because I feel that that's important. The image here is a lot bigger than the one in the original image, so I'm going to put it on a diagonal going from the bottom left corner to the top right. You'll notice with her alignment, it was completely to the left. Probably the question I get asked most with vellum is how do you glue it? So this is a really fine image. You'll notice I'm using a very fine tipped glue and I'm going over and adding little glue drops on any area that has a little bit more embossing powder, trying to hide it using the embossing powder. I'm going to use my Debbie tool here to keep things in place. I find this tool just so useful for so many things. I'm adding another one of these sentiments that is stamped in embossing ink, embossed in white powder, and then cut out in black cardstock. And one of my favorite card makers as far as style goes is Laura Bassin, and I love her paper strips here. I don't need an autumn card at the moment. I find her color choice really interesting for an autumn card. I think I'm going to adapt those colors as well, but figure out a way to make this my own so that I'm not using paper strips, but something else. I think I'm going to use my embossing powders. Now, of course, this original card is going to be perfect to use up any sort of paper strips. I've done videos on paper strips before. So I decided to switch things up. I'm going to copy the idea of having multiple lines going in 2 diagonal directions, but instead of using paper strips, I'm going to be using some double-sided adhesive and getting some use out of all those colored embossing powders I've collected over the years. So what I do is I remove the adhesive off of one of the strips. I'm going to use my dry brush here to take off all of that powder because it's attached to the static of the double-sided adhesive. Remove another one and then add a second color. So after you heat this all up here and melt all the powder, then you're finished. I could have obviously stopped here, and this is a really pretty gorgeous pink and purple, but I'm going to create some more strips, but I don't want to do them on top because I don't want to have to remelt the embossing powder. It might overdo it. I'm going to create some strips onto just some scrap piece of cardstock. Now I'm going to go through the same process as before. I heated all the powders and then I used my paper trimmer here in order to cut down all the little strips so they were like paper strips, just prettier. Now each one of them I completely glued down, and you'll also notice, of course, that the card size has changed as well. Don't forget to cut down your strips when they're all finished, and then your card background is completely done. I'm adding a You Are Loved die cut in black. I think you really need something to just really pop against all those colors. And then again, using my Debbie tool here to stick that down. And here is a quick look at that card. I think it turned out absolutely gorgeous. Now this card created by Dee's Art Utopia, I believe started off as a background that she colored that floral stamp in, and then she die cut it using the word die. Something I don't think of too often either is taking a colored image and then cutting it using the word die. I'm always kind of afraid to cut it because you spent so much time on it. And I love the sentiment, how it kind of has a few letters on each line but has one word. I don't have a die like that, but I'm pretty sure I can come up with a different alternative. All right, let's start by making our first change. So rather than stamping the floral image using some black ink, I'm going to heat emboss it. So when that was all done heating up, it was time to color it. I'm not 100% sure if she colored it by hand or if she used a stencil like I am. So I'm using a variety of colors of Distress Oxide inks, as well as some layering stencils here in order to color my image really quickly and efficiently. I'm using squeezed lemonade and fossilized amber for the yellow flowers, spun sugar and worn lipstick for the pink flowers, and then I'm using shabby shutters and mowed lawn to add the details to the leaves and foliage. This is a really easy way to color, and this was my first time using this type of stencil and stamp before, and it really made for a quick and easy background. Now it appears Dee used a Celebrate die that was all one piece and connected. I love the way that the letters sit on top of each other but only form one word, but I don't need a Celebrate die and I don't have this. And so I am going to use my alphabet letters here, and I'm going to line them up using my T ruler and holding them together in some mint tape to make sure that they stay together. And I'm going to die cut my sentiment that's just thank you out of my background here. Not only am I going to cut out the letters out of the background, I'm also going to use the letters to cut out a piece of white cardstock as well, so I can get a 2-for-1 card. So I'm putting that in the die cutting machine, and while we're here, let's take a look at the image again. Notice that on the white background, she also has an image imprinted into it, and there are multiple hearts. I also have a multiple hearts die that cuts stitches into my die cut. So I used that on the background, as you could see here, for a little added interest. So here is my relatively finished background here that looks and is inspired by her card. I'm going over to my 4-inch tape here, which I always have here on my paper towel roller, and I'm going to add some adhesive to the letters and the background that we cut out earlier. So I've grabbed the background now and I've added all that adhesive there behind it rather than adding a piece of cardstock behind it. Another thing I could have done, of course, was just add a piece of white cardstock behind it, and these would have acted as frames, the letters, but I wanted to have everything even in one layer, so I added some white letters, hence why I cut those out earlier. So I got a 2-for-1 card out of this one. Here's what they look like. I think they look fabulous and really different compared to the original example. So when I'm looking for specific inspiration, one of the things that I'll do is I'll actually choose one of the stamp sets that I haven't used yet, one that's sitting in my new card stash. And what I'll do then is I'll do a simple either Google, Pinterest, or Instagram search for this particular stamp set, and sometimes I get really lucky and something pops up. So I really wanted to use this stamp set. I've had it for a little while now, and I love the fact that it's a grouped layering stamp set. So what that means is, first of all, each layer stamps all at the same time. So I'm actually stamping all these flowers at the same time and not individually, which is a great time saver. And all I have to do to line up this stamp is actually line up those squares and rectangles that are around the stamp set, and it allows for really easy layering, which means super realistic images without the frustration of having to line up each layer of the flowers myself. Anyone who owns layering stamps knows how much of a pain that can be. So I went on Instagram and I found this absolutely stunning card, but I wanted to change it a little bit to make it my own. That's the whole point of this video after all. So I decided to look at the blended background. I see that she used a dark blue or a purple, blue and pink, and so I decided to leave out the pink. I decided to simplify it a little bit more. I can also see that a cover plate was used, so a snowfall background, and I decided that I don't have something like that in my particular stash, so I'm just gonna leave it. You'll also notice that there are 3 poinsettias here, and I'm only going to use 2. And I've also done in purple and in blue, which are obviously different shades because we use different ink. And because she did a slimline card for this one, there's 3 flowers fit really well, whereas for myself, it's not really the case. So once I was finished blending my background, in order to get a little bit of a sky look or the snowfall that she had on there, I decided to grab some white paint and I flicked it on the background instead. In order to get myself a snowy background, I decided to actually go in and cut myself my own little snowbank. As far as how the card was arranged, I stuck to pretty much the same idea, but again, it didn't all fit in the same way because my card isn't a slimline card, but an A2 size card. And I also didn't add anything more to the clusters here, like additional stamp sets or anything. I just stuck to what I had. So once I was all finished layering everything out, I stuck everything down using some glue, and then I had this beautiful card that I think is different enough from what I saw in order to call it mine. My next crafty inspiration is from the amazing Mona, and her cards are absolutely stunning in this turquoisey green and red. Now I actually had this stamp set already, so I was able to kind of recreate this look, but this time of course I'm using my very own color palette. So I decided to stick with a purple color today. Some reason Christmas is screaming purple to me this year. And I absolutely love the way that the background turned out. And I can see on Mona's card, she used a lot of sequins, lots of golds, and then some tone-on-tone stamping to decorate the border around the outside. Rather than use die cuts or any sort of stamps, I decided to add some gold paste to get those gold elements on my card like Mona did. I'm not too sure what she used for her card design, but for me, Glacier paste works really well. It's one of my favorite pastes because it dries pretty flat and it's so smooth and easy to apply. Now comes the fun big reveal of the background when you take your stencil off. It even requires slow motion, and I absolutely love the way that this turned out. All I needed to do was go in and add that Believe in the Magic of Christmas stamp, which I heat embossed using some gold embossing powder. I simply added it to some gold cardstock to make a frame and stuck it on my card, again to keep it a little different from Mona's design. Now when it comes to copying a card, don't think that you need to make it super similar or use the exact stamp set or anything like that. You could take certain elements and create your own design with them. For example, I was looking on Instagram again for this stamp set and I noticed this beautiful slimline card. But it might be a little hard to see here on YouTube, but it has this beautiful textured background. It was created by using cover dyes and it's all white on white. So it keeps everything super clean and simple, but very, very elegant at the same time. And so I definitely wanted to keep that look. So I went ahead and die cut my element here, my beautiful branch, and I decided to stamp Holiday Wishes. Now, I didn't have coordinating cardstock to help make this pop on that white on white background, so I went ahead and swiped some ink across the cardstock here, and then I used that as a layering frame. So if you never have coordinating cardstock, that's a way to get yourself some. So I went ahead, ran that through my die cutting machine, as well as several of the cover plates, the ones I had in my stash anyway. There was no need to go ahead and order the exact ones that I saw. And you can see it creates this beautiful subtle background. It's really elegant, it keeps things clean and simple, but it also looks really professional in my opinion. So I just glued everything together, added this to my card, and it was all finished. Again, you probably would have never guessed that I was inspired by the card that I was inspired by. But as I said, you can grab really inspiration from anywhere, no matter how small it may be. For my next card, I was simply inspired by the idea of using black to create a Christmas card. I don't really think of black when it comes to Christmas cards, but black and gold is always a super elegant and stunning creation. So I went ahead and stamped this background stamp using some embossing ink, added some gold embossing powder, and melted the powder in order to make this beautiful background. You'll notice here that the card that I was inspired on uses also a shiny gold in the cardstock, and I think it's just absolutely stunning. I obviously changed this up quite a bit, but it definitely was an inspiration for me. I decided to add a happy holiday sentiment using the same gold embossing powder as you see here, and then I was finished with the card, and it took less than 5 minutes to make. Quick and easy cards for Christmas are always a saving grace. Okay, so my next card here, I was actually inspired by my very own creation. Last year I created a card very similar to this one actually, and I decided why not recreate it this year, but add something maybe a little more to it. So I went in and I added my Distress ink backgrounds to create a galaxy background. I always use the same general colors, a yellow, a pink, a purple, and then I start filling in the empty spaces with dark green and dark blue. Then I go over the whole background using some black oxide ink. If this is too fast for you, I have a little bit more of a slower tutorial on how to use this background that I'll link to below in the video description, and that way you can have a look at that if you want to recreate this background. So then I went ahead and added some paint splatters onto the background, which I think just really makes it that night sky and that sort of galaxy look to it. So now came the part where I thought I need to change it up just a little bit to make it a little bit different and maybe a little bit more complex. So I went in and I tried out my Spellbinders foil trimmer. I'm still playing with this before I can give a true opinion on it or not, but I absolutely love the fact that it, cuts my foil without scratching it and that I can really cut it down so I can avoid wasting any foil for that matter. I went ahead and I added my frame that I was going to foil. This is a glimmer plate die. It's not a traditional die cut. I added it to my machine to get it all heated up, and then I hit the button. When it was all ready, I decided to add my foil here face down onto the die with the gold part facing down onto the die. And then all I need to do is just remove this piece of the glimmer and apply some pressure on it. And I apply my pressure by running it through my die cutting machine slowly, one time forward and one time backwards, just to be on the safe side. And then when I lift it up, I have this absolutely gorgeous border around my card. I just love my glimmer machine for Christmas cards. It just adds such a great elegance to the card and such subtlety. In order to finish off the card, I checked out this layering die. This is a nativity star layering die, which I'm a big fan of. The only thing is a little bit on the intricate side, so it does require a bit of patience when gluing it, because mostly your connection points for each of the layers is that tiny circle in the center. I was able to add that onto the front of my card, and when it was finished, it looked absolutely fabulous and a little bit of a step up from last year. Although last year the sentiment was added at the bottom, I was able to just add it within the frame.